All right. Welcome, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. We're very pleased to have you join us for our fifth session on competency-based education. And this session is entitled A Faculty Discussion of Competency-Based Education at EKU. A bit of a background before we get into the content. This session is designed as an interactive forum and an invitation for faculty to share perspectives, questions, and also ideas regarding competency-based education, also known as CBE, at EKU. We invite you to engage in a dialogue about the practical shifts in teaching roles, faculty workload, and also student engagement. And through this session, we aim to foster collaboration in the planning process and the design of CBE courses at EKU. A brief reminder that at this phase, we're primarily setting the stage and establishing a foundation for competency-based education at EKU. And so questions related to pedagogy, workload, and strategy for designing courses are all ideal. And then, of course, we'll follow up with additional resources related to specifics once we bring together this series next phase. So with that, we're very excited to have everybody here. We'll be recording this session as part of our CBE resources as we continue our planning process for EKU. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our facilitators this afternoon, Ann Eason and Mary Adams.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for being here this afternoon. We're excited to kind of wrap up this series on CBE and all of the really great conversations that we've been having around this. So starting off, I guess, like Rusty mentioned, some of the bigger questions, or I guess question marks, I should say, when it comes to implementing the style of course at EKU. Some of the questions that we've encountered a lot throughout these sessions and just when working with faculty. One of them being workload. It is a more than just a course redesign. We really recommend, and it is really best practice to kind of think about designing a CBE course on more of a program level for a couple different reasons. One of them being those competencies. We want to make sure that they are consistent and aligned throughout that entire program. We want to make sure students are supported when and how they need it, and that they're given adequate resources and opportunities to practice and demonstrate mastery of those skills throughout the program. So thinking about designing an entire program can seem kind of overwhelming. So we definitely understand where that concern comes in. But this is just a different modality, of course. So you're not reinventing the wheel. I imagine if a faculty member or a program wanted to take on this style of redesign and this style of teaching, you'll probably find that you have a lot of the resources and materials you need. It just comes with a really big shift in terms of the implementation process because it is a different modality. You are designing the course in a different way. You are interacting with the course in a different way. Your students are interacting with the course and moving through the course in a different way. So it is not a total reinvention of the wheel, but it definitely does require very strategic and intentional changes throughout every single course. Any questions about that or anything I missed, Mary?
Sure, I was going to just add to that. So just first off, I want to commend everybody and thank everyone for being here and thinking about CBE for EKU. It being, we've talked about it being one possible answer to a lot of challenges that EKU might face in the future in higher education. It's not brand new. We've seen other places do it well. So acknowledging that as well. And Anne had talked about kind of the elephant in the room, the fact that it does feel like a big workload when you first start talking about CBE. It feels like a massive, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to start from scratch and what that can really look like. But I think I see some folks in the room that I've had conversations with that can, attest to there are some fears around that. There are some different ways of thinking, but I think a lot of aha moments happen when I've talked to faculty as they're redesigning that if you have already really strong, authentic assessments designed into your course, that the transition does just look different around how students interact with that good work you've already done and how you lead them through those authentic assessments that you've already built. And so while your role might change from kind of being the keeper of the due dates, being pacing everyone a certain way to more of let's really focus on the skill building and the learning. That logistically that does come with quite a bit of, I might need to set this up in this way to help with that. I might need to set up some parameters around reassessment to make that work well. And I think that we've also talked about, Dr. Cannell mentioned in a true CBE, like utopia environment, that wouldn't be the case. We wouldn't have to work around those parameters, but because we are working within the kind of scope of higher education and within semesters and thinking about that pacing, that you might have to think about some of those mindset shifts of just how am I going to interact, how am I going to have students interact with the material, and what's my role going to be, and how can I make that practical? What does that look like from a practical lens? And how does my rubrics change? How do my presentation of some of that already good work that I've done, how will that look? So I just wanted to kind of add to that it is a new modality, like Ann mentioned, and like Ann said, if you've already done a lot of that great work with your course design and aligned and have authentic assessment, it might be a lot of just kind of moving some puzzle pieces around and shifting how they interact with your learning materials. Um, and maybe an initial assessment becomes a final assessment. Maybe a discussion board looks a different way or something along those lines. But it just acknowledging that the workload, while it can feel like the elephant in the room, this big, massive thing, that sometimes the aha moment is it may not be as big of a change as what you might be anticipating. So that's what I wanted to add to that. I'm
That's
interested
perfect.
though if anybody else, yeah, if anybody else in the room had any thoughts or any questions around the fears around CBE, the fears of the practicality with it.
And I will just mention too, we have kind of looked at a couple different models or a couple different structures for how a CBE course could look in Canvas. But again, at the program level, that's going to be really specific to you and your course and what works best for the content and the learning environment that you want to set for your students. So it can look a lot of different ways.
I see a hand, Linda.
Yes, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, because I teach in the online, 100% online environment. So I could see some of my courses transitioning to this fairly easily because a lot, I mean, we can't even require the students, to show up. They have to be able to do the whole course anyways, but to set it up to where they can work at their own pace and that. So I'm just interested to see that. And I know that our AACN body that's their ultimate goal for the DMP program is to make it all competency based. So that's kind of why I'm interested to see what people are doing and how they could transition from, the regular semester based courses to something like this in the environment. So that's all. I was just making that comment and thinking that there is, like you said, I agree with that. You probably have a lot built that you could kind of move over and adapt.
Yes, absolutely. And the online course or the online learning environment definitely lends itself to a more flexible pacing or a more flexible learning environment, again, depending on your course and the assignments, the material, the content, how you want to structure it for your students. The biggest shift, and this is exactly what Mary was just talking about with that mindset shift for competency-based education, is that it is different for every student, or it potentially is different for every student. We're looking at what students are bringing to us in terms of their background knowledge, their skills, things that they have already mastered. and what we need to provide them with in order to master that competency. So that could look different as far as the path they take to get there. That could look different in terms of the support and material and feedback that they get. But it is more than just a flexible asynchronous environment. It is really looking at the skill-based and the application-based part of the learning cycle. So a really, I guess, more smooth transition, definitely in an asynchronous course to a CBE, because you do have that flexibility. But again, kind of where that mindset shift really takes place.
Any other comments on some of the fears you may be thinking about with CBE? Okay. Well, we can move on to kind of our next thought, Anne, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, look, thinking about, and if you'll comment on, I'm going to throw it to you first for this, what you've seen with like the teaching roles, the workload of the instructor. I know we've had that question come up quite a bit through the series. What does that look like in real time as far as, being very engaged in that feedback loop? If you could speak to that, as well as student engagement, anything you want to tell us what you've seen as you've worked with faculty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad Dr. Manning is here because she can definitely speak on all of these points. But again, it is it is a totally different modality. So that mindset shift, I know I've already said that a couple times, but is a really big key component because just like Mary mentioned, you're not managing due dates, you're not managing point totals. You're really looking at the skills students need to be successful when they leave the learning environment. So CBE courses really emphasize that demonstration of skills and the application-based piece. So in terms of grading, providing feedback, especially when students are maybe moving through the course at a different pace and they might need different supports, different levels of support, ongoing support depending on the student and the path that they're taking. It could look really different, but really being intentional and strategic with the design process on the front end, making sure that you have the components and the resources that your students will need to be supported to hit that mastery threshold, is really where they're going to be successful and where it could feel a bit more manageable on the part of the instructor. Something that I forgot to mention earlier, back to kind of thinking about that program model, not only with workload of managing the development process, but also in terms of the ongoing semester, making sure that that your competencies are defined at that program level, they're consistent. They trickle down with all of the assignments, assessments, rubrics. Everything has a clear definition of mastery. So you know what you're looking for from your students in terms of the skills that they need to be successful. Your students know what they need to do to demonstrate mastery, and there's nothing hidden. So everything is upfront and transparent. Students know what they need, and then that also allows them to get the support that they need. If they're reaching out to you individually, it allows you to provide the support that they need, to make sure that you're looking at that competency, because your students, regardless of the learning environment, are all going to be coming in with different levels of knowledge and skills. But if we're looking at the mastery of the competency, what we want them to leave with, that's going to look different for every single student. So just kind of making sure that you're meeting their needs, plugged into the course, and yeah, providing them with the support and the ongoing feedback that they might need.
I think,
And Dr. Manning, feel free to chime in if I missed anything, because I know that you have experienced this over the past couple of semesters.
I do. I was going to write that out, so I was actually putting it in the comments. One of the things, having looked back, I wish I had done design-wise is think through what those assessment prompts are or grading prompts and add them to the assignment tasks or the tilt, and then have them somehow like do the work on that template. So I have some key reminders of what I'm looking at for grading, because you will grade like an assignment and then you may go over and grade. It's not like when we are grading, we grade the same assignment over and over. You're not. So it becomes I'm going to grade this assignment, and now I'm going to go over to module 3 and grade this assignment. Oh, wait, 2 days later, I'm going to grade module 1 from this assignment, and then module 2 from this person for this assignment. So it is easy to forget what the assignments are, especially if you're grading a lot of CBE courses at once. So little bitty prompts along the way, either on the rubric itself or on the Tilt CBE or something would be very helpful.
That's a really good point. And that's the cool thing. You'll kind of figure out your system, just like with any modality, you tweak things as you go. But I was actually going to speak to that if I think it requires really intentional rubric design with CBE. And again, it's not a sit and forget model, but you also thinking about the practicality of giving very authentic, individualized feedback, and how can you do that in a way that you can balance all of that, but also give students feedback to mastery. And my brain always thinks, I'm like, the rubrics really can help bring that. Um, so having that criteria built into your rubric that it can kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting at times, I think is really important. And then being creative with what feedback can look like, finding a style that works really well for you, whether that's video feedback, whether that's bullet point feedback. I know when I sometimes was in the classroom, I would have my own template for like it would be plus sign and minus sign, and that's how I would do that, and I would try to really force myself to give intentional feedback to those things. Also, designing things in a way that maybe you're not assessing every single aspect of a project, you're only aspecting this component of mastery can help with workload. Again, that depending on what the feedback loop cycle, that still can be quite difficult to jump between. But just trying to, when I'm talking to faculty with designing that out, trying to think of what does their style looks like? How can you give that good feedback? Can it be, oh, I love the idea of stickers, the confetti, all of that to build an engagement, morale, but make your life easier too, where you can balance that. And again, give the authentic feedback, but not be spending 15 hours doing that. We know that's not plausible to sustain. So that was something I was going to speak to, that having, and Ian talked about how everything's really clearly defined. It all is scaffolded in that way. Um, and then tweaking as you go to be like, oh, well, if I had just added this, that really would have sped up my brain. My cognitive could have really been given, the processing could have been given to the feedback as opposed to what in the world am I supposed to be looking for here? So I love that idea of building that into a template that they're looking at. I think that's great. I know I would love confetti too.
And that's another point I really want to emphasize too. When we're looking at a CBE style course, like we are looking at specific competencies. So your students might need knowledge or even a skill set from a prior course, but that might not be, I should say, might not be, that potentially might not be what you're evaluating through one specific module or assignment, or maybe the course in general. So they're going to need the background knowledge from microwave popcorn 101 in order to be successful in microwave popcorn 102, even though you're not assessing the same skills. They're going to need that knowledge. They're going to need the skills they've already gained in order to demonstrate mastery in a new way with new content. So just because maybe your rubrics might not be as complex, they might be smaller because you're just looking at one competency, potentially having that really strong alignment and making sure that you are evaluating them just on the competency and the skills that they need with that particular assignment or module or course, which again is kind of why that bigger trickle down effect is so important. Making sure that students have a clear definition, you have a clear definition as an instructor to know exactly what your students need to accomplish in this one area in order to be supported correctly throughout the entire track.
Anybody else have any ideas or questions or comments about that? I'll say that's the other elephant in the room, the instructor workload with providing the feedback loop. Has anybody heard any other great ideas or have any other great ideas that come to them, or any other questions about that? Okay. I also, with this, wanted to speak a little bit about student engagement. And I think this is extremely valuable in a CBE course, because wouldn't the perfect world be if your students show up and they're not just asking, what do I got to do? And they're at 11:58, all the things. We all know the things, right? But that's so, so important in a CBE course because they can't really move forward if they just have that mentality of what do I got to do? Let me just turn it in. It's not can you do it? It's can you do it well? And so that shift, I think that's going to be one of the biggest curves that we run into. And I think that's we can really try to combat that with intentional marketing, intentional recruitment, intentional educational pieces that come out. But I just I think that's so important for students to have that transparency. And I know in some of the courses, what that's looked like is building in kind of a CBE module to begin with. I know I've helped some faculty design that so that they knew exactly how this shift needs to take place before you begin, that you're not grabbing points, you're grabbing skills, if you will, in this course, and you really need to be engaged in that, or this is not going to be a great fit. It's not going to feel like a great term for everybody. Um, so I didn't know if anybody's run into some other ideas or things that they've done or what they've seen with student engagement and how that's looked with some of our piloted courses. Or Anne, if you had any ideas too, if you've worked with
I
faculty.
was going to say, I'm going to jump in really quickly.
Yeah.
And just mention too that, like we've said, CBE is not the only answer. It's just one possible solution. This style of course may not be the best for every single program. It may not be the best for every single student. But it does allow us to reach more students as a university, which is really wonderful. It also just gives those non-traditional students another pathway to get the degree or to get the experience that they need, and bring everything that they've worked on so far, whether it's they're already in the field and they're seeking an advanced degree, or they've had prior experience, maybe just practical real life experience, and now they need the degree in order to do the next thing that they want to do. It does allow us to reach more students and to appeal to more students, but it's not the solution. It's not the only solution, and it might not be a great fit for everybody. So maybe a student coming straight out of high school into a CBE course might not have the same level of engagement. They might not have the same um, motivation or discipline, or even commitments. And that's going to look very different for every single student. So definitely the student experience is something that we consider and want to think about with this style of course. And again, that goes a lot with the mindset shifts for the students and the instructor, but a really great opportunity for the university to reach more students and just to have another option, but it may not be the best fit for everybody.
And I think that's very true. I think back to myself, some of the way I maybe interacted with courses when I first began my degree versus now, again, a CBE course now might be a great fit for me, as opposed to maybe when I was 17, well, here on campus. Okay.
Yeah. And if there are any questions, comments about that side of it, we'd be happy to answer those too.
Well, I think with that one in particular, as with anything, intentional design is the focus. And with any good course, intentional design really can make a lot of difference. I do think with CBE, it's that design zooms out significantly, and that has to be a lot of conversations take place on across a course, across a program, across a university, and so forth. So just intentionally designing that all the way from your module 0 to your rubrics to your final assessment, being very thoughtful about that. I think is probably the common thread that we're picking up on as we talk about these conversations.
And when you think about supporting students where they're at or helping them fill the gaps to, they're all coming in maybe with different background, different skills, and we want them to end at the same place. It's likely that you at least have a lot of those resources and materials to allow them to practice those skills already. And it's a matter of, again, kind of assessing where they're at, where you want them to be, and providing them with the support that they need. So that could be in real time with your feedback. But just like Mary was saying, being very intentional, not only with the design of the course, the assessments, the rubrics, but also the support piece as well, because it is very likely that one student throughout the program is going to need some sort of support in order to hit mastery. So making sure that you're supporting them in all areas, making sure that all of the skill gaps are filled, and so that they can all end up at that same level of mastery. So the intentionality goes from beginning to end. And are there any other questions, maybe not related to the things that we have already talked about? Any other questions or anything anybody would like to ask? Yeah. Matt Winslow, go ahead.
Hello. Um, I was trying to wait to ask my question because it's an awkward one.
Okay.
My question is about the vulnerability of CBE to AI generated or agents that students could create to take CBE courses entirely without their input at all. I don't know if you know about the Einstein browser. This was something that came out. It's been taken down, but it really um, promoted itself as being able to take especially Canvas courses and almost entirely without students' input at all. Again, it's been taken down, but I just saw there's something now called Companion AI that I think works in a similar way and might be able to do a similar thing, which is to take an entire college course with very minimal student input. And I guess I'm worried about CBE because it has this flexible timeline that students might be able to progress really quickly through a series of CBE courses if they were using AI to help them do it in that way. What are your thoughts about that possibility?
Yeah.
Can
Definitely
I,
with any.
yeah, can I
Oh,
weigh in for a second? I do think that there's always that issue of concern of submitting an assignment through AI. I do think there, I mean, obviously we're fighting plagiarism all the time, but the other thing too, other than just the submitting an individual assignment, is it has to be graded and scored. And so there is a manual element from the instructor that goes through. So when they get to a certain point, scoring has to be done. So it's not like they can jump in and do the entire class without interaction from the instructor. There's certain gateways that have to be interaction, have to be an intentional interaction with the instructor before they can go any further. And I do think that does tend to help. It also tends to help with students. Like if you tell them ahead of time, look, you cannot turn in everything the last 2 weeks. It's just not possible for me to grade it and get feedback to you to reopen the next module. And the first run of these, they kind of try to do that, and then they figure out really quick that it's impossible. It's just is not feasible. And so they also think with some of the plagiarism tools and such. But if your rubric is set in a way that you're asking certain questions to, it's, the philosophy or theoretical, like the AI is not going to be able to imitate human reflection with some of the things from assignment to assignment to assignment to assignment. So by the time I've graded my students' assignments from the beginning to the end, I not only know about them, I know about their classrooms, I know about their experiences, I know what's happening outside of the thing. So if they couldn't really emulate every single one of those variables, they could, but it would take more work than it's worth, if that makes sense.
I think that brings up a huge point, and that was what my gut was going to answer to, is that I think you're going to have that concern, and that's going to be the world that the battle, the good fight that we're fighting for the foreseeable future in education, regardless of the modality. But I think this boils down to your design piece again, just like Dr. Manning was saying. The authentic assessment piece probably matters here more than anything, just like like an asynchronous course. That's probably going to be the same battle that you're thinking about. Not necessarily the pacing as much as just the AI component. So, by really, and I saw Dr. Scarafa mentioned her authentic assessment of it, the product piece. And so, if we are assessing for skill, what does that need to look like so I can make sure that you have that skill? And so, hopefully, when you craft that, like Dr. Main said, you're going to be able to pick up by the end because you've got that feedback loop, you know your students, you know their style, that it would be difficult for them to um, have AI do the entire course, the entire product. They might be able to have a piece or here, those sorts of things. But maybe we're designing in a way where we're leaning into the use of that as an assistant as opposed to a replacement. So I think again, it was my answer would be your design matters as always, so intentional, authentic, and then that feedback loop, being really in touch with how you're having them turn it in. Hope, and again, the ideal world, they'd be so engaged they'd want to pick up on the skills anyway. That they'd be no, they don't want to do that. But I would think my combating to that would be the same to the authentic assessment, the rubric, and the feedback being very intentional.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of piggyback off of that and highlight something that Mary just said is that CBE courses are designed to be skill and application based. So students are taking in the knowledge that they're getting in the course, whether it's from additional assignments, resources, learning materials, activities. And they're not only just showing you what they've learned, but they're showing you what that information allows them to do. So it's a step beyond just giving back the information. So there's a critical thinking component, there's an application component, they're synthesizing the information, analyzing it, and applying it in a different way. So AI, I'm sure, will always be part of the conversation, but I do think, again, just with really intentional design and in terms of what that competency looks like, what skill we're trying to make sure our students can master, what mastery looks like, what that threshold is, how I'm going to assess that, what I need to see from my students can kind of make those pieces a little bit more resistant. But definitely a concern for honestly any course modality, but definitely a CBE where students have more flexibility and we want to make sure that we are assessing the knowledge that they're coming in with, assessing the skills that they're coming in with, and supporting them as needed.
And of course, depending on the coursework and the assessment, some are going to be more vulnerable to that than others. But look, and so then as you run a course, if you realize that vulnerability kind of crossed a threshold and you had a lot of students being tempted to take that route, that's a moment to kind of, again, pause, see what the redesign piece needs to be. Is that really assessing what I needed to anyway? So. Yes, I love the idea. We can try to craft and gather even more resources and see how other places and how we're combating that holistically. So,
That was a great question. Does anybody
yes.
have another question, comment, concern, experience that they want to share related to any of these experiences? Dr. Manning just put a really great point in the chat too. Intentional AI is also a consideration because just like we've mentioned, it's probably not going anywhere. So empowering students and teaching them to use it as a tool to help them in their field, whatever that looks like for them, whether it's a brainstorming partner or something along those lines, empowering them and teaching them to use it as a tool and a resource rather than just something that's forbidden could also help make any sort of assignment or assessment more AI resistant, keep students engaged. And like Mary mentioned, ideally, our students would be excited about learning and getting this degree, and they'd be engaged and they'd want to do the assignments without any outside consideration. But that might be that might be a little too perfect of a scenario. So doing everything we can to make sure that we are assessing our students with the skills and resources that they are bringing in, and empowering them, giving them the information and the tools they need to be successful as well.
And I think that also ties into that the fit piece. What I look like as a student now as opposed to what I look like then. So maybe CBE, the programs and how that all fits in there. The vulnerability piece will change depending on that as well. So. Any other questions or thoughts or commentary on what's gone well, what's not gone well, fears, excitement?
Hopefully lots of excitement, hopefully more excitement than fear. I think it is a really exciting opportunity for us to have as a university, expanding our course modality, expanding the types of students that we can reach, is really exciting. So we are definitely excited about this opportunity.
And I will say the faculty conversations I've had, even if a program or someone chooses not to pursue CBE, it also is a really good opportunity to reflect on your current coursework and your current course design. And we're always striving for improvement. We're always striving to improve our pedagogy, our design, our authentic assessment, all of the things that we know make wonderful educational environments for our students. So that's excited me to have those conversations with folks as they see all of the CBE is grounded in some great principles, and so talking about that and how to just improve all of our modalities, I think is a wonderful thing for EKU. So that's been exciting and kind of refreshing conversations to be a part of as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's our good teacher pause. Is that what we would call that? The awkward pause. Oh, I see another question. This has come up before about the average class size. I'm not sure what that would be, where the tipping point would change. Anne, do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, I'm sure that it will be kind of ever changing and evolving process in terms of um, class size ratios, students, all of that, depending on the program and how it's progressing. But I can't give us a clear number. And I'm sure it'll be program dependent. I'm sure it will be course dependent and all of that.
Absolutely. Will depend on the.
Yeah. I was just going to say, as most of these decisions are, whatever works best for the program, the students, the instructor, all of that. And I'm just going to one more time put the link to the CBE resources that we've been sharing throughout these sessions in the chat in case I missed anybody earlier. So all of the slides that we have been sharing throughout these sessions are there, as well as just some additional resources are all in that folder.
All right. I'm monitoring the chat to see if we have any other questions. We've had a few great questions to the chat and some good ideas to build on as we move forward. Ned, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. Thank you for being a part of any of the sessions that you've attended and just taking part in these conversations with us. It's like I said before, we're really excited to be a part of it. And we're excited to partner with all of you, whatever that looks like moving forward.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Anne and Mary, thanks so much for facilitating the discussion today. we thought it was important to conclude the series with an opportunity for people to come back together and to ask questions and to share ideas. The goal, of course, of the series is to establish a foundation so that we have a common understanding for competency-based education at EKU and to design intentionality. So moving forward over the next few weeks and months, we'll be developing even more resources to establish that foundation to ensure consistency, primarily at the program level. We'll be able to respond to some of these excellent ideas and some of these questions and can continue to engage in dialogue across faculty. And so be on the lookout for those resources and those opportunities as well. And we'll build on the resources that Anne has shared to the chat here. All of the sessions will be recorded and or have been recorded, and we will bundle those as a toolkit for moving forward as well. All right, everyone. Anne and Mary, anything else to add for today?
I don't think so. Just thank you all again. Looking forward to the continued resources, continued conversations, and this opportunity here at EKU.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, for joining us and for the great questions. We'll archive those and be able to use those as we design future resources and experiences as well. So with that, thanks so much to everyone for joining us, and be on the lookout for follow-up over the coming weeks. Thanks, everyone.